Many of next cycle's top performers haven't even been released yet. Last cycle, we had Matic, we had Solana, we had Phantom that outperformed the market and exhibited gains of up to 500x. So looking forward into next cycle, I believe there is a crop of new altcoins which aren't even on the market yet, which will be releasing that have potential to exhibit similar gains to what Matic and Sol did last cycle. And these projects, in my opinion, have 50 to 100x plus potential next bull run. So it's time now to do the hard work and research these projects and prepare for next cycle and start to look at some of the best projects heading into next cycle that you could potentially accumulate in 2023 once they actually release. So in my opinion, I believe that we could have the next Solana or Matic sitting right in front of us. Now's the time to dig in and look at some of these projects. So in today's show, I'm going to be looking at 6 altcoins that I believe could be very good unreleased projects to start looking at for next cycle. And I'm going to show you how to get involved, whether that is through an airdrop, through getting into a pre-ICO, through getting into a giveaway, because obviously these projects aren't released yet. So we're preparing ourselves super early before they're even out. We're doing the research super early before they're even out. But that also means it's not as simple as just longing them on the market today. You actually need to do a little bit of work to start preparing for the release here. But I think that work is going to pay off because some of these projects are extremely exciting. I did do a thread on this the other day that you may have seen on Twitter, but I want to go into a lot more depth in today's show and give you guys some more details as to my thoughts into each specific project, why I like it, why I don't, and maybe give you a bit more of an in-depth look into how I'm actually approaching these coins, because some projects have an airdrop, some may not have an airdrop, and some maybe you may be better off getting the token on the open market once it launches. Some projects have ecosystem projects, which you can actually get into, even though the base layer isn't released. So there's certain ways to play each coin. So let's get straight into the show. And remember, at the end of the show, I will be giving you guys my market update and my current trades for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and a couple altcoins that I believe are showing strength that could potentially be breaking out. So at the end of the show, we'll do a trading segment. But without further ado, in the meantime, let's get into the top 6. The first one that I want to look at is 𝗬𝗎. And 𝗬𝗎 is a blockchain that is using the Move programming language, similar to 𝗵𝗲𝗄, that is also heavily backed, just like 𝗵𝗲𝗄, that was actually born after the Facebook project, the Diem project, went defunct. So what happened was Facebook was building a blockchain. They decided to scrap their blockchain, and a lot of the engineers, the Facebook and Google engineers that were working on that blockchain, decided to leave and start 2 projects, one of which was 𝗵𝗲𝗄 and one of which was 𝗬𝗎. 𝗵𝗲𝗄 has obviously released and done really well. It's performed super strongly. If we look at the 𝗵𝗲𝗄 chart, we could see that it's had a major run up since its launch. And a similar thing could potentially happen with 𝗬𝗎 when it launches. 𝗵𝗲𝗄 entered the top 15 basically the day it was launched. And given the fact that 𝗬𝗎 is very heavily backed, just like 𝗵𝗲𝗄, I would expect it to do a similar thing. It has a $300 million Series B, a $36 million Series A, has some of the biggest backers in crypto, A16, Coinbase, FTX, Lightspeed, Binance, and Jump. Before you guys say, oh, you're just shilling an FTX coin, remember, FTX invests basically in every good project in the space. Even though FTX went down, they were still huge investors, and you will actually see FTX leading a lot of investments across many unreleased projects in crypto. So they basically invested in everything, and I don't necessarily think this is a reason to FUD a project or say an upcoming project's bad, because yeah, as I said, they basically invested in everything, and they were some of the biggest backers in the space. But they do have huge backers, 𝗬𝗎, and obviously 𝗵𝗲𝗄 do as well. So that's one of the reasons why I'm interested in the project. And also the other reason why I'm interested in the project is because I believe the Move programming language is a very unique take on what we think the way to program dApps should be going forward. And apparently, and I'm not a developer, so I can't speak to this myself, but apparently it does offer some major efficiency upgrades on building dApps on Solidity, which is the Ethereum programming language. So that's one of the reasons why 𝗬𝗎 and 𝗵𝗲𝗄 are special in their own way. Now, the Move programming language has a few major benefits. I think the speed of creating new dApps makes it a lot more efficient. Also, the composability is also a lot stronger. And it is just an easier language to program on, which is one of the reasons why people are choosing to build on Move. And also, it's very expressive. So these are some of the reasons why there's a thread that goes over the Move programming language. But that is really what underpins 𝗬𝗎 and also underpins 𝗵𝗲𝗄. And just before we get into project number 2, I just want to point out, like, the reason why I liken the 6 projects in today's video to Solana and Matic is because Solana and Matic were kind of projects that were born in the bear market. So Solana, born in 2020 when it was launched, and we also had Matic, which was born essentially in 2019 during the bear market. You can also put Phantom on this list, 2019, born in the bear market. And these projects launched, and there just wasn't as much hype because obviously, it's a bear market. There's not as much retail interest in the market. It's hard for tokens to perform super well during this period. But after they released, they obviously had huge run-ups and exhibited some of the strongest gains across any crypto in the sector. So the reason why I'm saying some of these altcoins could be the next Solana or Matic is because they're launching in similar market conditions. So they're launching prior to what we think will be a bigger bull market. They're launching in the midst of lower retail demand for tokens. And they also have the backing and the strength to potentially go on and do a run like Matic did and like Solana did. So that's kind of why I compare them to Matic and Solana, just because of the phase we're in. You have that speculation phase where tokens launch, but people are just speculating because there's no real price action to underpin the token yet, because obviously it's a bear market and they're launching in bad market conditions. Then you enter the retail zone where a lot of hype starts to build up and a lot of people start to enter these tokens as the market gets more frothy. And then you obviously reach a top at some point, and then you hit an offloading stage where people offload, and then you kind of re-gear in another accumulation phase. So the goal here is to invest in projects during the speculation phase, ride them up during the retail zone, obviously ladder out profits along the way into the retail zone, keep a small bag just in case. And as the offloading stage starts to hit, maybe look to exit most of our positions. It's a very simplified way of looking at how to trade a new token, but that's essentially what we aim to do with these 6 tokens here. And as I said, each token will have a different strategy for how you will get your hands on it. Some people may have to buy during the speculation phase once the token actually launches, and you're going to need to wait for a fair market value to enter that project, so you're not buying into a crazy pump like Aptos did on its first day. And some projects, you're going to be better off trying to obviously either go for an airdrop or get into an early pre-sale round, because some projects do have a retail pre-sale round. So as I said, each project you kind of have to approach a little bit differently. In terms of how I'm approaching 𝗬𝗎, that's the first one on this list. I do believe, although they said there's not a confirmed airdrop, I still believe that there probably will be an airdrop for 𝗬𝗎. The Aptos airdrop, if you can remember back to a couple months ago, a lot of people made like $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 off that airdrop. So if Aptos did it, I think 𝗬𝗎 being born in similar conditions, both being built on Move, shows that it could potentially have an airdrop. So that is something that I'm looking for, because they do have a testnet 2 coming out soon after their testnet wave 1 was successful and achieved network stability. Their testnet 2 is kind of pushing the boundaries a little bit more, which also means that gives potential for retail to actually use the chain and get involved with some of the dApps on the chain. So using the testnet wave 2 could be a way to get an airdrop. That's one way I'm approaching it. And I'm also just keeping my eye closely on the social medias here. So joining the project's Discord, following them on Twitter, just keeping updated, because sometimes they'll do giveaways and they'll kind of give more clarity over how they will be releasing tokens. All right, let's get into project number 2 on this list, and that is 𝗓 Network. Now, 𝗓 is very unique because it's essentially a sector-specific blockchain. And what this means is that the whole chain in its entirety is built specifically for trading, and what they say to give exchanges an unfair advantage. So it's an order book-focused L1 blockchain. It's designed to be faster and more reliable than other types of blockchains, while also coming in under that trading niche. So it's built on 5 key pillars. The first key pillar is a native auto matching engine. The second key pillar is a twin turbo consensus, which improves throughput and latency. And the third thing is breaking Tendermint. So it has a time to finality of 600 milliseconds. That's actually very, very fast. Most other blockchains come in, at the very fastest, 1 to 2 seconds. So 600 milliseconds is a fraction of that. Number 4, market-based parallelization. And number 5, front-running protection. So what they want to do is they want to become the decentralized NASDAQ. So the way it works is that smart contracts can access shared liquidity. So each contract doesn't operate in isolation. The different smart contracts talk to each other, and they all pool liquidity together to funnel liquidity to exchanges that are built on the 𝗓 network. So the 𝗓 network is purpose-built. It's designed solely for trading. And I do believe long-term that trading is going to be a huge narrative. I'm a huge proponent of the DEX narrative now, and also heading into the next 2-3 years, where you realize that if all these new participants are coming on chain, they're going to need places to swap. They're going to need places to trade And the chains and the DEXs that can harness this influx of new users, they'll be the major beneficiaries. And for me, it's very interesting to have an L1 specific chain that is trying to do this in and of its own right. So Say Network becomes one of them that I'm keeping my eye on for this purpose. Now, there's a couple benefits it has over its competitors. I think Injective is probably something that you could call a competitor. Has a quicker block finality. It's also sector specific, and it executes transactions in a parallel processing sequence. That's slightly different to Ethereum, which is sequential processing, but we've seen parallel processing become a lot more popular amongst newer L1s, as it's shown to be a lot faster. And they also had a raising round, but it was a lot smaller than a lot of the other projects in this list. So Say, probably one of the more underground projects, I guess, if you want to call it that, because although they had Multicoin, Coinbase, 𝗕𝗏𝗘, some huge backers, they only raised $5 million. So it's a smaller, more niche L1, but I think their vision's cool. And I agree with the trading narrative. And I was really impressed by their testnet, which showed a very quick block time, but also showed 10 million in transactions and 800K testnet wallets actually testing out the network. Now, part of the reason why there was a lot of wallet activity on the network during testnet is probably because 1% of their token supply is being allocated to their testnet to reward early members of the Say community who use the chain. And I talked about this a few months ago on my Twitter. So if you're not following my Twitter, at Miles Deutscher, link in the description, make sure you're following me because I keep you updated on the latest airdrops and opportunities. I said, Say is an airdrop that we should be looking out for. And we know that the people that were using testnet 1, so if that was you, you will probably be expecting an airdrop when the token actually launches. But I do think there's still opportunities here. And 𝗵𝗏𝗏𝗏 did a good thread on the opportunities for an airdrop because they will be releasing another testnet. And because they're a smaller project, they need ways to market. And airdrops are just one way of marketing. If you think about it from the project's perspective, you're getting a whole new bunch of users onto the chain that wouldn't normally be on the chain. And although the usage is a little bit faked, it is a way to generate traction in social media terms and usage terms. So for a smaller project like Say, that only did a $5 million raise compared to some of these other projects that are dealing with much bigger marketing budgets, it does make sense for them to want to do an airdrop, which is one of the reasons why I'm approaching Say in that manner. And I also think Say is definitely going to be active with the giveaways and that kind of stuff. So make sure to keep your eye on their social media because it's, a cool project. And obviously we are expecting a token launch sometime this year. It kind of seems in a similar scenario with 𝗁𝗍, which is kind of approaching that Q2, Q3 launch date. That's kind of where I see Say, but maybe it ends up happening slightly later in the year. But nonetheless, it's one to keep our eye on. Number 3, Celestia. This is one that I'm actually, out of the whole list of 6, most is a big word, but one of the ones that I'm most excited about because it's a modular network. And I do think modularity in crypto is a very good way to create an interoperable layer 1 ecosystem that we haven't really seen come to practice yet, although we've seen great examples of how the tech can work. Now, since Celestia is modular, it gives it a few major benefits. It offers both consensus and data availability, but it also enables the use of sovereign rollups. And obviously that is a scalability solution to alleviate network congestion and make the network faster. Now, 𝗏𝗏 does a very good job, and I highlighted this in my thread of breaking down why modular blockchains are revolutionizing the space and why they're exciting. So I highly recommend checking out that thread as why, because it kind of highlights why it's one of the biggest innovations in crypto. But the way you can kind of contextualize it is through this graph, which is kind of like Celestia is doing what Cosmos is doing. So an interoperable ecosystem, which means apps connect to apps, which have different chains, which connects to other apps with different chains. So you kind of have a chain app, and a chain app, and they all kind of speak to each other. So they're all governed by social consensus. They all share security, and you can peer-to-peer bridge assets between chains. The Ethereum model is slightly different because the app chains don't connect to each other. So it's not interoperable. So you can't really bridge from app chain to app chain to app chain. There's no shared liquidity there. You need to bridge back to Ethereum to bridge back to another app chain. So although it's governed, although like they have shared security on the Ethereum network, you can't bridge directly to chains. You have to bridge through the L1. And it's governed by a smart contract. So the Celestia model is combining both. So it's having the app chains. So it's having the modular apps stacking on top of the Celestia network, which is essentially underlying the app chain model. So it's kind of like Cosmos plus Ethereum So it's kind of like, yeah, a modular chain. So you get the benefits of interoperability. You also get the Ethereum related benefits of decentralization and security. That's not to say Cosmos isn't doing that. It is. They have their own approach with the Atom Hub. But in terms of Celestia, it's a hybrid model and it's super interesting. And 𝗏 probably does a more eloquent job at explaining what modularity is. But I do believe modularity is going to feature in some of the top performers in 2023 and beyond. That's why I've got my eye on Celestia. And moving on from Celestia, I also have my eye on Fuel. And Fuel is basically what is going to be the execution layer for Celestia and Ethereum. So you can see Fuel kind of steps in here to execute transactions on top of layers like Ethereum, Solana, and other networks like that. So what we can see, because Fuel is a network that can work with any chain, so even the Bitcoin network, the Ethereum network, what we're going to see is potentially modularity stacking on top of other chain models. So being able to execute on top of other chains. So it's the world's fastest modular execution layer, which can leverage Ethereum security or Celestia's security or whatever chain it's on top of without being restricted by the limitations of the underlying EVM. So it's super interesting how they're kind of structuring themselves here. And that's just another example of modularity. So on Celestia and Fuel, the two modular chains I talked about in today's show, there's two ways to get your hands on these tokens. The first is to try and go for a Celestia airdrop, which has been touted to have the token TIA. So if you want to go for this airdrop, Celestia also had 56 million in funding. You can follow some of these steps in terms of using the testnet, interacting with some of the ecosystem dApps when they launch, running a node could be one way as well. Basically, with airdrops, it's just about using the ecosystem and participating actively in the ecosystem. Primarily, that's the best way to get airdrops. So whenever there's an upcoming project and they have a testnet, and you want to put yourself in the best position to get an airdrop, just using the ecosystem is one way to do it. And maybe come up with a calendar where, Monday you use one network, Tuesday you use another network, Wednesday you use one network, Thursday, etc., etc. So every day you're kind of doing something to work towards an airdrop farming plan, if that's the strategy you want to take. But remember, you're not going to get every airdrop just because you interact with the testnet. Doesn't mean you'll be rewarded. It obviously significantly increases your chances of being rewarded, but it's never guaranteed because not every project ends up doing an airdrop, and certain projects kind of go with different initiatives. Like we saw 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 go with the 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 campaign through their Discord. That's kind of why it pays to just be in the loop with these projects and be in their Discords and be in their Twitter groups and Telegram groups as well. So one easy way to go about this would literally be to go through the 6 projects in this list, join all their Discords, and create a Discord folder called upcoming projects. So you're kind of always up to date with the upcoming projects you're angling for or trying to stay updated to. So, you're not out of the loop if there's a major announcement or airdrop. Of course, I'll do my best to keep you updated on Twitter and on these shows, but sometimes you're going to miss things, and it's best if you're kind of staying on top of it yourself. Fuel Labs did an $80 million raise. Celestia did a, $36 or $55 million raise. So they both did fairly big raises. Not quite as big as zkSync or 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 or Aptos, but still like fairly sizable. And they also had major leads like Polychain Capital and Binance Labs, and also Jump Crypto, Delphi Digital, Galaxy, Spartan Group, all investing as well. So they had some big backers, and clearly the modular blockchain approach is something that the VCs like. Just remember, before we get into Project 5, at the end of the show, I'm going to be going over my trades. And there's some quite important trades at the moment because we're at a critical point with Bitcoin and Ethereum. So just reminding you at the end, once we go through these 6, we'll jump over to the market and look at what's happening in the current time. So number 5 project that I'm looking forward to, that is currently unreleased, is Quai Network. Now, I don't usually like proof of work blockchains, but I'm making an exception here because I think the sharded security model that they're going after is very interesting because it allows kind of merge mining and sharding in tandem. And that's a pretty novel combination. I haven't seen many other L1s doing that. So although I'm not a huge fan of proof of work, I don't actually have many proof of work coins in my portfolio. So it's kind of something that I wouldn't mind having exposure to, because I don't know, you just never know in crypto. I do believe proof of stake is the future, but proof of work coins could definitely get a run at some point. We saw they kind of had a narrative run pre-ETH merge as people were kind of speculating that the ETH merge could fail. So Quai Network is one that I'm eyeing, not specifically because I want to invest in proof of work, more just because I like what they're doing in terms of implementing sharding, merge mining to kind of allow easy asset transfers between chains. You'll kind of see a theme across a lot of the projects I talk about today, and that's interoperability. Because I do believe that's like one of the biggest narratives in the future. And it's only logical looking into 2023 and beyond that we invest quite heavily in projects that have immersive interoperable ecosystems. Because as I said, that's where I think the space is headed. So that's one benefit of Quai. And it also has 5 testnets launching. So from an airdrop perspective, I definitely think Quai is going to get an airdrop. Considering, I mean, it has 5 testnets. So that's giving you 5 different opportunities to use the chain before mainnet launches. And it's giving, from Quai's perspective, them an opportunity to accrue users before mainnet launches. So they did a $10 million raise. So the second smallest project on this list. But unlike a lot of the projects on this list, they have been very, very transparent about their tokenomics. So they've kind of gone out and released their token docs a lot earlier than other projects. So we definitely know a token's coming. And we also know that 25%, based on their release schedule, is going to go towards adoption incentives. So they're trying to incentivize people to use the network. And a quarter of your total supply for adoption is a huge, huge, huge allocation. I basically never see this in crypto. 25% of the token supply being given away to the community, essentially. So there's an opportunity here. If Quai succeeds to get your hands on quite a valuable airdrop, and it's a big if. Not every project in this video is going to do the 50 to 100x that I talked about at the start of the show, but you're positioning yourself ideally in enough upcoming projects that you're going to hit one, because for every Sol and Matic there was a failure. So you may invest in some failures, but you also may invest in some winners. So there's no guarantee with all of these projects, but some of them will end up doing huge returns, in my opinion. And in tomorrow, I'm doing part 2 to give you an overview on the other 6 that I didn't talk about today. So yeah, there's a thing on Twitter by 𝗵𝗲𝗏, and I also did a quick kind of touch up on the Quai network airdrop that explains how you can actually go for an airdrop there. Okay, and the last project, so project number 6, but not least, because I think this is one of the strongest projects on this list, and probably one that you've heard a lot about, is zkSync. And this is essentially the main ZK roll-up scaling solution, probably apart from Starknet, that is launching in 2023 and is created by Matter Labs and has a lot of hype and a lot of backing behind it. So we can see that they've done some huge raises, 2 $200 million raises, so that's $400 million, and a $58 million raise with the seed and Series A and B prior to that. Some of their major investors are Dragonfly Capital. Obviously, that's Haseeb's firm. We've got A16 as well, Lightspeed Ventures, Variant, and Blockchain Capital. A16 actually led the $50 million raise, and BitDAO actually took a whole round to themselves, investing $200 million, which was announced on the 27th of Jan. So this is one of the most heavily backed projects in crypto, and it's one of the most heavily backed projects in crypto for a reason, and that's because their mainnet hasn't even launched yet. But look how big their ecosystem is already. I mean, everyone wants to build on ZK. Why does everyone want to build on ZK? Because there's a high probability chance that ZK is the ultimate solution to scaling Ethereum. Now, I can't say that in absolute terms because we don't know. There could be a new type of rollup that comes to the forefront and kind of proves itself. But as of now, it is obvious that ZK is the solution. And that is why a lot of projects, Polygon included, are now starting to incorporate ZK rollups into their strategy. So launching EVM chains, ZK EVM, starting to include rollups in their side chains. And obviously Ethereum also wants to include rollups, but they're kind of very far behind in terms of when they're going to be able to fully implement a lot of this stuff, because they're kind of dealing with a broken architecture and they're trying to fix it through a 5-step plan, which I think will succeed, but that's going to take time. And in the meantime, we're going to see ZK, which is technically a layer 2 launch. And I think it's going to gain a lot of traction because, as I said, ZK is the future. This is something Haseeb said as well. Obviously, he's a major investor in zkSync, which is probably underpinned by the fact that he thinks that ZK is one of the biggest narrative to look out for in 2023. And you've also got some other projects in this niche as well, like Starkware, etc. But ZK is one that I'm very interested in, and I do think they're going to do an airdrop. The only thing is, a lot of the requirements I think probably have already passed. So if you're watching this now and you haven't already used the zkSync testnet, I think the major opportunity to get the biggest airdrop's probably gone. And I did talk about this a few months ago on my Twitter. I think then was a much better time than now. And I also did a video on this a few months ago. But I don't think it's totally over. I still think if you interact with testnet, if you use some of the ecosystem dApps, there's maybe a small opportunity for you to get involved and get a smaller airdrop. So definitely look out for zkSync. It's going to be a big project next year. But also, airdrops aren't the only way to get into projects. And I kind of want to give you a couple other options now for how to get involved in a project if maybe you've missed the airdrop. And that is probably the biggest one of this entire list, investing in the ecosystem and related protocols. So a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll look at this list today. They'll say, okay, we've got Fuel, we've got Say, we've got Celestia. Maybe I can get a couple of airdrops, but I've missed a lot of the airdrops, or I didn't end up getting an airdrop. So at that point, you've got two options. You can wait for the project to launch, and when the project launches, then you can buy the token on the open market. And I think for all of these coins, that could be a valid strategy. The problem is buying a token on the open market relies on the tokenomics. So no matter if the project is great, we know zkSync's great. We know that 𝗬𝗎's likely going to be great. The problem is just because the technology is great doesn't mean that the price will be great. And there's still a chance that zkSync launches at a really, really, really overvalued rate. And although we love the tech, we just can't buy into the project at that price. So the major problem with buying these tokens on the open market when they launch is that they could be overhyped. There's also a chance that they're severely undervalued. And that presents massive opportunities to get into a token which can 50 to 100x. Now, even if they are slightly overhyped on launch, I expect that to kind of cool off. And I do think that the adoption of these individual ecosystems will end up shining through in the long term. So if you bet on an ecosystem you're bullish on, over the long run, it should end up canceling out the kind of initial hype. So it definitely makes sense to buy a token on the open market once it launches if you think the tokenomics are strong, but it doesn't always make sense. And in that case, I would look at investing in the ecosystem and related protocols, which means the narratives which aren't directly the token itself, but are affected by that token. So in crypto, things don't work in isolation. If Arbitrum pumps, Arbitrum doesn't pump by itself. You always get other L2s that pump alongside Arbitrum. If Phantom pumps, Phantom just doesn't pump by itself. The ecosystem, so the DEXs, the liquidity protocols, the AMMs, the borrowing and lending platforms underneath Phantom, they tend to perform really well. So whenever you look at one narrative, you have to look at the related narratives, either being A, the ecosystem coins under that narrative, or B, the related protocols in the similar niche which are benefited from that narrative. And this gives you an opportunity to get into tokens that you may have missed the airdrop to. So let's say worst case scenario, you missed the airdrop for all of these 6 projects and all of these 6 projects launch overvalued. Okay, then you need to take a step back and look at where they're fitting in. If Celestia is overvalued when it launches, maybe invest in another modular blockchain that's launching. Because if Celestia does well, people are going to speculate on the other modular blockchains. So kind of a rising tide raises all ships in this case. If zkSync launches super overvalued and you miss the airdrop, then you can look at some of the other ZK scaling solutions. Now, they may not perform as well as ZK, but just like Solana and Matic were the top performers, you had other L1s that performed really, really, really well still, like AVAX and some of these other ones, because they were all kind of under the same niche, and that was there wasn't enough block space and we needed more block space. So a lot of these L1s perform really well because there was this anticipation of a huge need for block space, which at the time didn't end up being true, but still may be true long term. So you always have to look a little bit further and don't just kind of look at things in isolation and say, oh, I missed this, I can't get it. It doesn't work like that. There were always beneficiaries of a narrative. Now, I 100% think you should still try to get all of these 6 projects, whether that be through their airdrop, whether that be through evaluating them on the open market, or whether that be through an ICO. If you can get an ICO, if you know someone, if you have friends, sometimes you can get in on a friends and family round, and if you don't, sometimes you can get in on a public pre-sale round, which means they'll essentially give away a certain amount of tokens to the public, and they've got to do this to their most loyal members. So the ones that are in the Discord, the ones that are in all the groups that are following them. So make sure you're doing all that. But if all else fails, you also have the approach of investing in the ecosystem. So that's kind of why I wanted to bring these 6 projects to you today, because we're framing things early, because truly you really are early to these projects. They're not even out yet. So you can start kind of preparing and thinking about, oh, maybe modularity does fit into the future of L1. So, oh, maybe we do need a trading specific blockchain. Or, oh, maybe ZK rollups are the future. So once you start thinking like this, you can start angling your portfolio towards these new narratives. And that's why it's so important to be early and looking at these new narratives. So I'll keep you updated on the best way to approach these projects. But I just kind of wanted to give you some more in-depth insight as to what my thinking is in terms of getting exposure to them before they launch. What I want to do now is look through the charts because, I mean, the market's pretty crazy at the moment. Things are looking very bullish, but Bitcoin is also at a very key level, and so is Ethereum. So I kind of just want to frame my thinking for you guys in terms of what's happening in the current market and look at some trade opportunities as well. So the first thing is a more macro view on Bitcoin. I want to just zoom out for a second and look at where Bitcoin currently sits. So in crypto, when you're trading, you kind of have to make a decision before you open a trade as to what your bias is. So what's your read on the market? And you kind of have to determine whether that bias is long or short. And that will kind of dictate how you trade. So if your bias is long, you'll long more than you short. And if your bias is short, you'll short more than you long. And that bias depends on the market trend. That bias totally depends on the trend that we're seeing in the market at any given moment. If the trend is bullish, then obviously you want a long bias. If the trend is bearish, obviously you have a bearish bias. And when I look at Bitcoin right now, it's very hard to have a bearish bias for this reason. We flipped above the 200 EMA on the daily, which is a very key level. We rejected off that quite significantly in April, and that's one of the reasons or one of the indicators that led to that massive decline. So reclaiming the 200 EMA, that was the first key level that Bitcoin needed to reclaim to push up towards these higher targets of 25 to 28K. And that's quite significant in my opinion. And that's why on the show the other day as well, I said it's very hard to short the market right now unless it's a short-term scalp trade. I don't mind the short-term shorts for like maybe a few hours just to make some quick money. But in terms of our slightly longer time frame trades, it's very, very hard to short the market right now. And I'm kind of avoiding doing so just because it's very risky. And I kind of want to follow the trend because in crypto, generally that pays off. So unless we break below the MA, my thesis remains bullish. And this is quite a simple way to think about it. As long as we remain above the 200 MA on the daily, long more than you short. And if we break below, then short more than you long. And that's kind of my very simplified version of how I'm approaching the market right now. So now if we go more into the short-term price action of Bitcoin, there's kind of a pattern that's showing. And this is kind of like an extended bull flag kind of leading into another extension. But if I zoom in even more and we look at the current range we're starting to set, I'm seeing sideways movement in Bitcoin, but also bullish consolidation. And what this has created is a range between 22.4 and 23, and to the higher end of that range, 22.87 to 23.34, which is giving us a range to trade in terms of longing. Now, the thing is, it's very risky to long right now. So right at this second, if you're watching it live, if you're watching it after, maybe just look at your charts and see where Bitcoin sits. It's risky to long right now because we're approaching resistance. If anything, scalp shorters might be interested in shorting the market here. That's if I'm talking right now though. But over the next few hours and over the next day or so, I'm interested in longing at the lower levels. So potentially if we do get a rejection or a pullback to this level, this is the level that I'm interested in longing. And that's 22.412. Now, that obviously gets invalidated if Bitcoin breaks out and then retests. So if we have a breakout here now to 23.5 and then we come back down into this pocket, I will now look to long in this pocket. But right now, the range that I'll be trading is the 22.4 region here, where I'd set a trade here and then I'd set my stop just underneath it, underneath the final level of the range. So that's kind of where I'm looking at longing, just based on what Bitcoin is currently showing. And Ethereum is the exact same. So Ethereum, instead of being, I think, 2% away from its support, is 1.6% away from its support. And that is at the 1,600 level. So for Ethereum, 1,600 is a level that I'm interested in longing. So that's kind of how I'm approaching the market right now. Longing more than I'm shorting, just because I'm trying to follow the trend. If you're kind of really, really, really desperate for a trade, you can, I suppose, scalp trade at the top of this range here, laddering in here, and then kind of like your final ladders here. But I just think that's risky, and that's a very small time frame trade because, I mean, the trend overall is bullish. But these two trades, they aren't like going to be life-changing trades. I think you might get a few percent off them. Obviously with leverage, 20-30% is possible. They're kind of my targets, but they aren't like huge breakout trades. They're just kind of playing the current range we're in and playing a bounce trade. So yeah, I guess you could call them like smaller money trades, and they aren't kind of our final breakout trades. But that's kind of if you're itching for a trade, what I'm looking at. If you do want to trade, you can do so on GTrade, and it's very simple to trade on a DEX. And I recommend, if you haven't tried trading on a DEX yet, that you actually try trading on a DEX, because it's very cool being able to keep custody of your own assets in a MetaMask wallet, but being able to use them to trade and simply just connect your wallet to an exchange and trade. So I'm a big fan of trading on DEXs at the moment. And GainsTrade has a lot of pairs. So if you want to trade Bitcoin or ETH, like we talked about, or other coins like ADA or Link or whatever coins you're interested in trading, you can do so on GTrade, and obviously have the benefits of keeping your assets non-custodial on a DEX. And there's a link in the description to trade on GTrade. So if you click on my referral link and trade, you can trade on GTrade. And I also did a tutorial on how to trade, because a lot of people kind of were a bit confused, but it's actually very simple. You just connect your wallet, make sure you have DAI in your wallet. It's a stable coin that you'll need to use the DEX to swap into, or you could just simply buy DAI on Binance or Bybit and transfer it straight to your MetaMask, and then start trading on either Polygon or Arbitrum. So it actually is quite simple. You just need DAI in your wallet, and then you can, start trading with that wallet as long as it's on the Polygon or Arbitrum network. So yeah, use a MetaMask, use a block wallet, any wallet that kind of facilitates DeFi stuff. That's essentially how you do so. And just kind of on the gains topic for a second, it's kind of crazy that they're having their best week for fees ever. And this is kind of a trade that I'm quite proud of, because I called this on the show at $1. And I don't know what it is at now, maybe like $4.20, something like that. But we've made over a 4x essentially since that call. So the ones that have been, even more, 4.5x. So the ones that have been riding that with me, congrats. This has been one of our best trades of the year. And we kind of spotted this narrative super early. We spotted GMX was doing well. We kind of thought, where was the rotation going? Probably into gains. And we got into gains at a very good price. And obviously I've been taking profits along the way, but still have done multiples on this trade. And I know a lot of you are in it as well. So congrats, we spotted it. And in terms of where I see gains going from now, given the fact they've got their trading comp launching soon, which will get a lot more trading activity on the network, and kind of prop up what is already an all-time high trading week, potentially even higher, it's hard to be bearish on gains in the short term, because I think there's a lot more to come in terms of, if this market breaks out to 25 to 28K, which you can't rely on, but if it does, then we're going to see a lot more activity on the trading front from retail in general. They're going to get very busy with trading. And that means you're going to have beneficiaries, and those beneficiaries are DEXs, and gains could be one of them. So although I probably wouldn't ape into this now, and just like a lot of alts, I'd wait for a pullback before buying more gains. You should have your entries by now, because we've been talking about this one for so long that, if you don't have your entries, I'm sorry. But I mean, we've been talking about it for months and months and months. So you should be well positioned in a hold right now. But if you do want to buy and you didn't get in, you can wait for a pullback. But yeah, as we've seen, pullbacks right now are few and far between. It's not a reason to FOMO in, but it's just we're going to have to execute a little bit more patience on some of these coins. Speaking of some of these coins, I also want to talk through some of my buy levels on Arweave and Solana, two projects that are very popular on the channel. So on Arweave, if I go on the daily, I'm seeing a very, very key level that's about to break, and that's the 990 level. And if this level breaks, we definitely could see Arweave push up to that $15 to $20 region. But the key here is confirmation on the daily. Because what actually happened yesterday was we broke above and then we simply just came back down. So the issue with this is that we didn't confirm. And that's actually kind of bearish that we didn't confirm. So in terms of an Arweave long, and obviously you can take a short here if you're betting on a rejection. But as I said, personally, I'm longing more than I'm shorting. But there is definitely valid shorts if that's your strategy. It's not mine, but if it is yours, then you can look at doing it. But in terms of the long scenario, what I'm doing is I'm waiting for a daily confirmation above this level. And once we confirm above, then I think that definitely gives us license to then push up to that $11 region. But we need a daily candle close above the 987 level for this to be a valid long, in my opinion. And with Solana, it's a very similar thing. I think a daily close above the 24, what is it exactly? So I'm going back to the other time frame. 2450 level is very key. And zooming in on the hourly here, we can see we are currently below that level. So those are kind of my levels for Solana and Arweave. Looking for that Solana break above this level. Looking at the Arweave break above 987. If that does confirm above on the daily, I think they become very good longs. And that would probably be in tandem with a Bitcoin breakout. But Bitcoin definitely could pull back here at the 23K region to the bottom of this range. And then we long the bottom of this range, or we just long the confirmation if we break out and then retest. It's very stupid to kind of buy breakouts without buying retests. So although sometimes you're going to miss trades doing this because not every time Bitcoin's going to retest, overall in the long run, it's just better risk management to buy on confirmation than to buy pumps that kind of have no sign of pulling back, because at any point they can violently pull back. Even though they seem like they never will, oftentimes they do. And that's one of the major lessons we learned in 2022. So just be kind of cautious, always buy confirmations, try and buy the pullbacks on alts when you can. But I'm kind of trading with the long scenarios more in mind than the short scenario. And the DYDX trade, I just want to go over this quickly. That this is probably one of my best trades. And I shared this on the show for you guys. And I'll just prove that I shared it on the show like 3 days ago. Some of our trades didn't hit to the ones that watched the show. Some that just Bitcoin never really got there for some of the alts we looked at. But there was one alt that I was looking at. Where is it? It's here. I said at the beginning of the show, there's one coin that I'll buy today if it hits any level. I said out of all these coins, I'm waiting for pullbacks, but DYDX I'm buying today because I just think it's at a good level pre-unlock, and that was at $1.29. And the video is called 5 altcoins I'm buying. It's $1.29. It was down 10% on the day. And also on Twitter, I did a post as to why I was buying DYDX and explain my logic. And you can see the date here on 10/41 on Jan 19th, 2023. If we look at DYDX since then, and I hope you guys actually got on this trade if you're following me on Twitter or the shows, it absolutely exploded. We literally got the Pico bottom. So January 19th, 10 p.m. Was around this time. Was around the show was in the morning at 11. So the show was here and then the tweet was here. But since then, let's go from the show level, it's up to its highs 47% and to the current level 35%. And that might not seem like a lot, but actually in trading terms, that's ridiculous, because if you're using any sort of leverage, you like 5x leverage, you just did a 2x or 3x. If you use 10x leverage, you just did like a 4x. And if you're using like 3x leverage, then you made a double. You doubled your money in 3 days. So that was a good trade. So we're on a good run. We're on a good run with some of our spot buys like GNS. We just need to continue to stay pragmatic, take profits when profits are there and not get too greedy, because the market is like obviously very bullish right now, but we still need to kind of be level-headed and trade accordingly and trade with risk management in mind, which means, setting stop losses, not getting too greedy, and only buying on the pullbacks and retests of certain levels instead of getting greedy. You guys have my Ethereum level and my Bitcoin level as well. Apex is another exchange you can trade on, which is a decentralized exchange. They are actually powered by zkSync. So one of the major topics of today's video was our kind of thesis as to how zkSync and L2s are going to really feature quite heavily in this market. And Apex has already started to utilize some of the rollups, and they are an L2-based exchange that also are affiliated with Binance. And they actually have some of the lowest fees of any DEX, and it's one of the fastest fees of any DEX. The only downside is the lack of pairs, but in today's show, I gave you a Bitcoin setup, an ETH setup, a Solana setup. 3 of the 4 pairs that I talked about today are actually on Apex, because they have Solana, they have Bitcoin, and they have ETH. So similarly to Gains, you literally just connect your wallet. You can trade on ETH, BNB, Arbitrum, or Polygon, as long as you have USDC in your MetaMask. So just get USDC in your MetaMask, press connect on your wallet, and then you can start trading any of these tokens with leverage of, I think they have like 25x on some pairs. So yeah, you can trade high leverage if you want. Don't necessarily recommend it, but if you want to trade leverage, you can. You can also set a stop loss and do all the things you do on a normal centralized exchange, but on a decentralized exchange, which obviously has its own benefits, like being non-custodial and also giving you the chance to diversify a little bit. So for example, I like to spread my trading out across a variety of centralized exchanges and decentralized exchanges to give myself the best of both worlds. So the flexibility of trading on a DEX, because a lot of my holdings are in MetaMask and other wallets. And because my holdings are on wallets, it's very easy for me to just trade stable coins that are sitting in a MetaMask on a DEX rather than me having to pull it out onto a centralized exchange. And I think it's a good habit to get into, which is actually keeping coins on a MetaMask with a Trezor or a Ledger, which actually enables you to kind of utilize those coins for trading when you want, instead of keeping them on a centralized exchange, and then something like an FTX happens and you're kind of rugged. Now, I don't think a Binance gets rugged. So, if you have coins on Binance, I think you're safe. But I just think in general, it's good practice, just as a general crypto enthusiast and participant, to keep your coins on a hardware wallet and use it in your own custody instead of having it in the hands of an exchange. And one way you can do this is through the MetaMask Ledger pairing, which is a very popular way of doing things. Kind of means if there's a new opportunity, you've got liquidity there to take advantage. Because I also hear a lot of people say, like, oh, Mars, you talk about these tokens, they're not on centralized exchanges. Well, like GNS, for example, for a long time, and I think they're going to get more listings soon, but for a long time, they were only on DEXs. And the QuickSwap DEX, specifically on Matic. But if you had funds in a MetaMask, then there's no problem to you. You just bridge over to Matic, or likely you already have funds on Matic or ETH, and you can purchase GNS tokens, for example. So sometimes it's good to have that non-reliance on the exchange and actually be able to buy spot just on a DEX, because you'll have every token listed on a DEX, not necessarily the same scenario when it comes to centralized exchanges. So cool. Apex is Bybit. I think I did say Bybit. If I said Binance, maybe that was a slip of the tongue, but no, it is Bybit affiliated, which means through your Bybit exchange, you can literally click on the exchange on products and go straight to Apex. So there's an option to trade on Apex there, link in the description if you're doing it through Bybit, or if you want to use Gains Network, there's also a link in the description for that. Just get in the habit of trading on the DEX, and I think you'll be good to go. And yeah, there's a tutorial here if you don't know how to trade on a DEX. So that's kind of the trading segment done. Those are my levels. Hope you guys found the show interesting, though, in general, with the 6 altcoins that I think could potentially be strong performers in 2023. And tomorrow, I'll talk about the other 6. And there's one of them in the other 6, and it's in the thread, but I'll give you more details in tomorrow's show. One of them, I think, is probably the biggest opportunity out of all of these, because I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's easier than some of the other projects to get access to. So I'll talk about that one tomorrow at the same time at 7 p.m. EST. And I'll also update you guys on my trades at the end of the show. Kind of a new segment I'm going to start doing is giving you guys trade updates to kind of keep you in the loop of where I'm thinking and what I'm thinking, because sometimes I can't always just tweet about trades. It's better to just come on and explain my logic. Very hard to explain logic on tweets because of the character limit. So much easier for me to come on the show and share trade setups with you guys. And do it live every day. All right, cool. I will see you in the next show, which is tomorrow. Thank you guys for the support on all the shows. It means a lot to me. And yeah, I'll see you at the same time tomorrow. Peace out.